Hi, you've clicked on to today's tropical tidbit for Tuesday evening, August 13th, and we're still watching a tropical wave in the Caribbean moving westward that we've been watching for several days now, getting now farther to the west, and you can see that it's slowing down and the trade winds are starting to pile up into it now as it slows, and convection is going off over a large area in here, and this will be worth watching over the next couple of days to see if it can try to consolidate a little bit more as it nears the Yucatan Peninsula. I do expect an area of low pressure will probably try to form somewhere east of the Yucatan by Thursday. The question is exactly where this occurs. If we zoom in on this a little bit here, the wave axis is just west of Jamaica, and then we have kind of a monsoonal gyre, which is a little hard to see down here. This is the actual area of low pressure. If we can draw an L anywhere, it's down here, and this is moving northwest, going to be merging with this wave axis as it comes westward. And the question is, when these two meet east of the Yucatan, which one will be dominant and where will the main area of low pressure form east of the Yucatan? Either way, the effects will be roughly the same in the Caribbean, with lots of torrential rainfall and perhaps winds gusting to tropical storm force in this area, spreading from east to west over the next 2 days or so. And so flooding could be a concern for these folks, but considering how large this complex is, it's going to take a very long time to develop if it is going to become a tropical storm, and it could very well wait until it gets somewhere up into the Gulf of Mexico before it develops, if it ever does. So we're likely to see mostly just rain here for the Caribbean, not likely to be a wind threat unless something unexpected happens. And we see the models still supporting development here. This is the GFS 18Z bringing a moderate tropical storm into the North Gulf Coast, and the Canadian a day later, slower than the GFS, showing roughly the same location though, with a tropical storm hitting the Gulf Coast. So the models are still holding on to this pattern that will favor at least some kind of development of this system. The good news is that the pattern doesn't really favor a hurricane exploding in the Gulf of Mexico, but a tropical storm is certainly possible and could bring even more rain to the southeastern U.S., which certainly doesn't really need it at this point. They've had a little bit much. And you see these models here bringing it northward, but a track like this still isn't quite set in stone. The Canadian and the GFS bring it north because they latch on to this part of the wave right here near Jamaica. They think there's a vorticity maximum in here where there's extra spin, and they bring this towards the Yucatan Channel and really develop it in here. So the GFS and Canadian have a low pressure center developing to the north. Some of the other models, like the European and the UK Met, keep the low pressure center much farther south over the Gulf of Honduras because they're seeing this monsoonal type gyre to its south that will be moving northwest and will be more of an anchor for this wave. And this is worth considering because the GFS and Canadian can have problems feeding back areas of convection like this on the northern tips of tropical waves, and we've seen them be errant in this trend before, and so far the GFS and Canadian have actually been underestimating the pressures near Cuba, the Cayman Islands, and Jamaica today by 1 or 2 millibars. Even their 6 to 12 hour forecasts are not verifying today, as well as some of the other models which keep this farther south. So it may be that this real low down here becomes more of an anchor, and we get low pressure consolidating farther south, perhaps near Chetumal by Thursday. And if that's the case, then it has a chance to slip farther westward, because if we look at the upper pattern by day 3 here, this is the GFS ensemble mean at 500 millibars. Our system would probably be somewhere in the vicinity of over the Yucatan or just north of it by this time. If the GFS and Canadian are correct and the low pressure center develops near Cancun or the Yucatan Channel, then you can see it has a nice clear path up towards the Gulf Coast on the eastern side of this weakness that develops in the Gulf of Mexico due to this shortwave trough that digs in over the south. However, if the low pressure consolidates a little bit farther south here and starts coming across the Yucatan, then we have a problem because it can try to get stuck down here. And a lot of these Gulf of Mexico systems, if they get west of 90 west in here, they can get stuck on the southern side of these troughs, and they can't always pick them up, and sometimes they just hang down here and kind of mill around deciding where to go. Sometimes they end up shooting up north anyway through the gap. Sometimes they just stubbornly continue northwest and never really recurve. So this is something that will have to be watched. The location of where the wave consolidates near the Yucatan will be key to its future track, and we will likely know a lot more about that by Thursday and certainly probably by Friday. We do have some models that actually still stick with the westward track. This is the UK Met showing it going into Mexico by day 6, and it stays south. The European never really develops a system, but you can see the wave axis gets into the western Gulf by day 4. But notice it does get extended up here, really strung out towards the north and northeast towards Louisiana. And this is showing how even if the storm does get into the Bay of Campeche or somewhere in the western Gulf, there's going to be moisture peeling away from it towards the old frontal boundary that is currently lying across the southern U.S. as that trough digs in. This will get in here, and it's probably going to be strung out with lots of energy trying to get taken away from it to the northeast. And this is what the GFS and Canadian try to feed back in there, but the entire system may not go towards the Gulf Coast. And we could even see it try to split or some funny business like that. But something may linger down here, and that's currently what I'm leaning towards, given that the European has historically handled the situations in the Caribbean better than the GFS, and so far the GFS has had a little bit of a bias with the pressures today in the northwestern Caribbean. So we'll have to see how that goes. Right now I have no reason to change essentially the graphic I made yesterday. I updated it today, still expecting low pressure to develop near the Yucatan. Heavy rain and flooding will be the main threat for this entire area of the world here. This is unlikely to develop rapidly in this region due to land interaction and how big it is. Once it gets into the Gulf here, we may see it try to develop into a tropical storm and get named Aaron, and we'll see how it looks by the time it gets into the Gulf. But right now, again, the track towards the North Gulf Coast, certainly a possibility. Many models are showing it, but many models are also showing more of a weaker system just staying to the south here, getting stuck. This is a complex steering pattern, so the forecast is uncertain. We will likely know more on Thursday and Friday about which route this system will take. But right now I'm still giving the nod to the Western Gulf, given the trends I'm seeing today and no conclusive evidence that has changed my mind. So we'll have to see how that results. Basically, the entire Gulf here should keep an eye on it, but this is really not the biggest worry in the world anyway. The pattern really doesn't favor explosive development, given that this trough that digs down will likely shear the system if it comes north, and even though it may strengthen some, again, a hurricane seems unlikely at this point. But of course the tropics are always unpredictable, so we will have to continue watching this with care. Again, flooding the main concern right now for this area of the world, and then flooding could be an issue up here as well, especially if it takes the northerly track. This front that's laying down here is going to be bringing heavy rain to the south regardless of whether we get a tropical system coming up to just add to the rainfall. And if it does come up, it will only increase the rainfall totals in that area, and they've already been saturated this summer. So flooding could be a concern in the southeast. It would be nice if it came over here and gave rain to areas that really need it in Mexico and southern Texas, but we will see how that develops. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for watching.